My goodness. It's a hard one, this. I have done this.
It's a hard one, yeah.
I have done this before.
What on earth have you created?
The most curious questions I've ever been asked was when I was living in Japan in my early 20s. I love that Gen Z phrase, main character energy. And just seeing how my younger colleagues, who are right at the start of their careers, are already using AI quite naturally.
Curious Conversations.
Welcome to Curious Conversations Northern Edition, live here today in Manchester. So today I'm joined by somebody who's a very proud Northerner, who now has a Northerner t-shirt on, very good, who loves to travel, passionate about young people and getting them into jobs they typically wouldn't get into.
Absolutely.
A strategic comms and stakeholder engagement specialist, a passion for devolution, which we might come on to later. One thing I found quite amusing, actually, is you're a stickler for Gantt charts and good grammar.
Absolutely.
How very strange.
We can get into that as well.
Yeah. Loves karaoke with Kate Bush, your go-to.
Yes.
And you are currently director at Social, who are an integrated communications agency.
Yes.
So welcome to Curious Conversations, Racheal Johnson.
Thank you, Julian. Great to be here.
So would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you've got a passion for creativity, curiosity and innovation?
Oh, great question. Well, as you said, I'm a director at Social and head up our Leeds office. We're a purpose-driven PR agency. We work predominantly in the built environment, but also with a lot of public sector clients. And we're really passionate about the power of communications to kind of affect positive change, particularly in, positive social change. So I honestly don't know where my sort of interest in creativity and words and language came from. Both of my parents were quite scientifically minded. So famously, the one O-level, as it was then, that my mum failed was French, and that's what I got my degree in. But I've always been interested in words. I don't know if it was being an only child, was always surrounded by books. So I think that's where a love of language, love of writing kind of was really instilled in me from quite a young age. And I decided that was something I really wanted to pursue as a career. Initially wanted to be a writer, as a lot of comms people do. We're all frustrated authors at heart. But found my way to comms as a way to kind of combine that sort of passion of words, passion for creativity with my kind of interest in the world and in politics and in society.
Perfect. So you have seen some of the other podcasts now. So we are going to jump into the Lego activity. So we'll get the Lego out now, but what would be great if you can create something that represents your passion for creativity, curiosity, innovation. There is no rules. You can pick and choose what you want, and we'll have a chat as we go through it.
My goodness, it's a hard one. This I have done.
It's a hard one, yeah.
I have done this before at Social. We did a Lego creative play session.
Yeah.
I'm just going to grab a few. So yes, we did do a Lego creative play session. I have to admit, I do find it quite challenging. I guess it's because I've not got great spatial awareness. I'm more of a words person, but I'll just see what I can make.
So what on earth have you created?
Well, I thought, obviously I work in communications.
Yep.
And communications is fundamentally about people.
Yep.
So I kind of was intrinsically drawn to the people.
Yep.
And two people having a conversation. Don't ask me why this one's got a flag in its head. It was just a way to use the flag. This one sort of represents me, I guess. And this is
I like your haircut.
Yeah. It's called, well, I thought this is quite a nice shape for like a kind of creative brain and ideas, and I think that's what working in comms is sometimes like. You've got all these ideas, kind of flowing through your head, and you're trying to kind of make sense of the world around you and put those ideas together in some sort of coherent but creative way. So that's me as the comms person with all of my ideas, which I have to admit is something I really love about comms. I like that almost puzzle of trying to find the right strategy, find the right set of tactics to reach a person.
You've got a lot of ideas coming out of your head as well at the moment.
Yeah, lots of ideas coming out of my head. And then this is my audience that I'm engaging with. And I guess I've deliberately made this person taller than me, because I think part of my job as a comms practitioner is to elevate our clients, to elevate their voices. And they've got a crown and a flag, because ultimately we want them to be seen as the best, the leaders in their industry.
Very good. we'll jump into the questions now. So as the podcast called Curious Conversations, I always start with something about curiosity. So what are some of the most curious questions you've ever been asked or ever asked yourself?
Oh, interesting. I think probably the most curious questions I've ever been asked was when I was living in Japan in my early 20s. So after finishing my master's degree, I decided to spend a couple of years, teaching English and French in Japan. I lived in a very small rural community in the far north of the main island, Honshu. And I don't know if it was because I was a curiosity or it's something just around, kind of Japanese culture, but I felt I was always asked questions everywhere I went. And some of them were quite mundane.
Yeah.
Some of the common ones were around, can I eat Japanese food? Can I use chopsticks? Which I would say is I'd have been very hungry after 2 years in Japan if I could not do either of those things. Yeah. But I think what really set those questions apart, even though the questions themselves weren't necessarily anything, kind of mind-blowing, it was the fact that they were born out of a genuine sense of curiosity, that it felt like people were really interested in sort of learning about me, forging connections. And that's an experience that's kind of really stuck with me throughout my life since. It felt, as I said, I think it was partly because I was a curiosity. I was, a kind of very tall, blonde, white woman. Only 3 Westerners in a community of about 30,000. So I stood out and people wanted to know about me. But I think I've reflected on that experience here, back in the UK and in the US. My husband's from the US, so we spent a fair bit of time out there. And it feels like we've kind of lost that art in the West sometimes of actually engaging in questions and be genuinely interested in the answers.
Yeah.
I feel sometimes, conversations in the West, it's almost like dueling monologues somehow that I love that Gen Z phrase, main character energy. And I don't know if it's because we've all got social media platforms. We're all kind of used to being the main characters in our own lives with our own broadcast channels now. But it does feel as though, the art of the question and the proper sort of exchange of ideas and Q&A just kind of feels like a bit of a dying art now.
And I think probably the art of listening as well.
Definitely.
People hear but don't listen.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing I found is around empathy as well, that people don't share their experiences. So whether it's because they don't want to share them or whether they feel, I don't know, I think it's changed, I think, now.
Yeah.
And I suppose as leaders, we have to start demonstrating that to younger professionals. And actually, this is why I think is the right way to be. So like asking those curious questions and not being afraid to ask the silly questions.
Absolutely.
Because obviously nobody knows. Being a hero and a know-it-all just doesn't wash anymore now. There's enough people around just so you can ask questions of everybody.
Absolutely.
And people are willing to share.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, I'm really privileged to lead quite a young team of young creatives who are brilliant, and I learn from them every day. I think it's really sad, if you are a relatively experienced professional, but you think you've got nothing more to learn, or that young people in particular have got nothing to teach you. I mean, as someone who's a Gen Xer, I kind of did grow up with some digital technologies, grew up using computers, but things like we were having a great conversation at work last week about AI, the potential for AI to sort of transform our business. And just seeing how my younger colleagues who are right at the start of their careers are already using AI quite naturally, that's just one way I'm like, okay, I've got so much to learn from you guys. So I totally agree. I think being open to that exchange of ideas and being open to, what you can learn every day.
Yeah,
that's pretty sad.
We have a reverse mentoring thing in internally where me as a senior leader has a future professional come and mentor me.
Fantastic. I love that.
As part of that, you have to learn not to mentor them as well, and not guide the conversation, but it's around asking some questions. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And then in return, I will give them some mentoring. So we'll do it like a 2/3, 1/3, or 3/4, 1/4. So it's part of them to effectively to help them in terms of asking questions and not being afraid to speak to a senior person in the business about giving some advice and things like that. So
yeah, absolutely, and sharing their ideas of what they think could be done differently.
Yeah. So next question, and it does link into your experience in Japan. So and we have spoken about this on email anyway. So obviously Japan is one of the most, I suppose, progressive and innovative places from where it has been to where it is now. So was there anything, I suppose, that you take away from Japan, or you think actually it was so far ahead of where we are in terms of Western culture, or in terms of progression around infrastructure and things like that?
Yeah. I mean, so much. It's weird. It's quite paradoxical, Japan, because it's very innovative in some ways, but very low tech in others.
Yeah.
So, like my apartment that I had in Japan, I mean, this was the early noughties, so things will have moved on in the last 20 odd years, but I had like a heated toilet seat and also the old dancing toilet, but no central heating, and my shower was a gas. It had a pedal, so I had to. It was like, like if you light a gas hob, it was like that. But then I had to pump a pedal to get my shower going. So it's quite paradoxical in those ways. But the thing that really struck me, and especially as a northerner, was high-speed trains that run on time. And I think Japan has so much to teach, certainly the UK, in terms of infrastructure. It feels like sometimes in the UK, the narrative is we've got to have a certain level of growth before we can invest in our infrastructure. Whereas Japan, it's completely the reverse. It's the infrastructure that not just enables growth, but enables people to have a really good quality of life. And I think there's such a strong emphasis on quality of services and quality of public services in Japan that we've kind of lost a bit of touch with. And obviously the economy in Japan has been stagnant for 3 going on 4 decades now, but they've still been able to invest in that world-class infrastructure that, powers their economy but powers community as well. So the thing that really struck me is the Shinkansen, the bullet train, which, surprise, surprise, I'm sure a lot of people would say that when they visit Japan. But when I lived there in sort of 2003 to 2005, the northern bullet train line stopped in my prefecture where I lived. It was in a city called Morioka, and it didn't go further north than there. In the 22 years since I've left, well, less than. I mean, this was in place, 7 years ago. That Shinkansen line has been extended all the way to Hokkaido, which is the northernmost island of Japan. So they've extended the line, including building a tunnel, a tsunami and earthquake tunnel under the sea to connect Honshu, the main island, with Hokkaido, the northernmost island. And you're like, wow, that's happened. I mean, the planning obviously happened years before that, but that was constructed in the space of, less than 2 decades. And whereas at Leeds, I went to University of Leeds in 97, lots of talk of Supertram then. Leeds is still the biggest European city without a mass transit system.
I think that, and I've seen posts on LinkedIn around it was given approval, I think 15, 20 years ago, and every year, and I think it's just been announced again, Supertram's coming.
Yeah, I mean, fair play to the mayor, Tracy Brabin in West Yorkshire. I think there's impetus behind it like never before, and that's largely due to the efforts that she and the Combined Authority have been making. But yes, I sort of, in my days of working in the public sector before I joined Social, lived through a couple of iterations of what we hope will become a West Yorkshire-wide mass transit system. But yeah, it just feels like Japan and countries in Europe, you don't have to go as far as sort of the Far East to see some of this great infrastructure. It feels like they can build stuff, and in the UK, we're almost like we struggle to get out of the quagmire of planning and funding, and particularly with publicly funded infrastructure projects.
And also, I think the funding's obviously quite a big issue, particularly around things like HS2, where it's original budget and it's extended, so then people lose trust.
Absolutely.
Trust and ability to deliver it. So
absolutely.
The same thing with Hinkley C. Now we've got Sizewell C as well.
Yeah.
In terms of, it's just people see a number or see a delivery date and go, maybe, which is a shame really, but.
It is, and I think it's almost become a sort of a self-reinforcing prophecy in a way, that people are really sceptical now because we never deliver anything.
Yeah.
So we don't deliver anything because we lose, there isn't the political will and the public support for those schemes. And we've got to find a way of breaking that cycle. Because I think part of the reason costs go up is because it seems to take just so long to move things forward. And I think, again, looking at the mayor here in the north, looking at what the mayors are trying to do through, the Great North, which is their sort of new collaborative partnership of northern mayors, but also in their individual city regions, they're developing the political clout to get things done and force action a lot quicker. So let's hope that does result in some much needed, some nice fast trains here in the north. So it doesn't take me, I think, 2 hours to get from Wakefield in Yorkshire to Manchester, which is where our HQ is. It's about 40 miles.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It makes no sense.
Oh, well, we'll see. Once we get devolution done, once devolution's done, that's it. Be
keep
simple.
Our fingers crossed.
We'll never know. So one of the things I'm also quite interested around is how does curiosity and creativity affect communication strategy, particularly where we're in a world of, like we just talked about, saturated media.
Absolutely.
There's always you can end up just being noise, I suppose, more than anything.
Yeah.
So how do you, I suppose, remain being creative or curious to get something that's really interesting for people to read?
Yeah, no, another great question. And I think, well, like most industries, the communications industry is being, transformed quite radically at the moment by technology, by that sort of, always on kind of news media and social media. I think the curiosity is absolutely key. I think you can't be a good communications professional unless you're curious.
Yeah.
Because fundamentally, communications is about people and connecting with people. And to do that successfully, you've got to know what makes them tick. You've really got to get under the skin of what are they interested in, what are their politics, what media do they consume, how does the world around them, the economy, other factors kind of shape their lives. So you've really got to understand that before you can develop messages that are likely to engage them and sort of resonate with their interests. So there's part science. A big part of comms is science. It's data gathering, it's insight gathering, it's understanding who your target audiences are and what they need from you. But then that cut through in that sort of very noisy, media landscape, that's where the creativity is absolutely key. If you don't have a creative message now, then it's easy just to feel like it's white noise.
Yeah.
I forget the number, but I know, collectively, the average person is subjected to thousands and thousands of communications messages a day. We think when I was young in the 80s, mainly it was kind of, TV advertising would probably be my main source
from 4 channels.
Yeah, from 4 channels, exactly. Whereas now, we're getting TV from how many different sources. We've got social media across numerous different platforms. Even just walking through a station, I always find it quite interesting sometimes to look around if I'm walking through a station and just trying to count how many subliminal messages or advertising messages there are. And our brains are struggling to process all of that. So you need to have something quite creative, edgy, bold that's going to kind of disrupt that and make people stand up and pay attention.
Where do you get inspiration from? Because obviously the problem is if you, I suppose, the reason I ask is effective because we've got so much stuff going on all around. You could end up replicating what other people do. So how do you become inspired, or do you look for other use other media sources? Do you ask other people, or?
There is, I suppose, like in any industry, there is a bit of that, seeing what others are doing and seeing if you can do things differently or adapt things. Social media is again quite interesting. I think, seeing, although there are lots of challenges around social media, and the impact that's having on various facets of the kind of world we live in. I think what is interesting is how it's democratized creativity in a way. Everybody, to an extent, who has a social media platform is a content creator. So like viral memes and things like that, we sort of take a little bit of inspiration from some of those for certain clients. I think we're quite lucky. So the comms that I specialise in, it is B2B. So looking at kind of some of the consumer-focused, marketing campaigns and trends, that does sometimes give you creative ideas for B2B communications that are quite edgy. They wouldn't fly necessarily in more of a consumer-facing sort of marketing campaign, but they feel quite new and for sort of a stakeholder or a political or a business audience. But I think, just watching the news, keeping in touch with current affairs, understanding, the world we're living in, changing trends. I think that and sort of coming up with stuff that's going to connect within that, within those. That's really the key to it.
So I suppose, so we've worked on stuff together for UK Reef, and particularly is around having a challenger mindset, I think. So
yeah.
Do you think having that, I suppose, a different opinion sparks interest, or because is it, I suppose, from your perspective, is there a lot of greyness and everyone sounds and appears very similar, therefore you don't stand out?
Absolutely.
You've got something interesting to say, but you don't really stand out. But being controversial, challenging is probably quite interesting.
It could definitely grab attention. So something we're doing with a few clients at the moment is obviously planning for the spending review tomorrow. So it's very, very topical. And a lot of, clients we work with, and also in my former life when I was client side, we would want to say something around a government fiscal event, but it's about the noisiest sort of comms moment you can imagine. So we do a lot of work to sort of say, well, what are the messages you're trying to get across? Why do you want to use this opportunity to sort of, put forward your views? And actually, what are you saying that's different? Because if you are I see a lot of businesses will just put out quite a generic message around things like a government fiscal event, just rehashing the content. Yeah. But everybody's trying to do that. Unless you're out the traps quite quickly in those kind of situations, you're not going to get that cut through. So I think absolutely being a bit different, going against the grain sometimes, or having a different perspective on a narrative. I think, quite rightly, and I think UK Reef are doing this quite well, we are trying to encourage a more diverse range of perspectives, particularly in the built environment space. So if you're offering something from a different perspective than the norm, that's another way I think of getting attention.
Perfect. It sort of comes on to the next question I've got, which is about what role does asking the right questions play in crafting compelling communication?
I mean, it definitely does play a role. And I think, there's a whole industry of market researchers and pollsters that are kind of, really skilled in the art of the question. We do lots of community engagement and, asking open questions, all of those kind of tried and trusted techniques are key to sort of getting the right, gleaning the right insights from people. But I think as well as asking the right questions, back to your point at the start of this conversation, you also need to practice listening. And quite often it's the really subtle clues that people give if you're talking to them or you're interviewing them that gives you that hint to actually what their real sort of feeling is. And I think this is what politicians get wrong actually sometimes. I mean, they've got bags and bags of polling data to work with, but sometimes they have they try to put people into boxes, and I think sometimes that's where you're too reliant on data. You're trying to get people to match a certain market segment or something like that, rather than seeing people as complex entities who have different views on things. I think the thing that really winds me up the most is this idea of the red wall voter, as if people who live in so-called red wall constituencies, particularly here in the north, we're all almost a bit of a monoculture, whereas people from so many different experiences and backgrounds and interests that live within those communities. So I think actually listening to what people are saying, that's the big part of really crafting comms messages that resonate.
The one thing I think, particularly from a built environment professional, so I'm a chartered civil engineer, so I suppose I've got a unique perspective on it to a certain extent, is that being able to ask open questions is quite difficult for people, particularly from a technical background, or in a client environment where you're speaking to somebody, asking a who, what, why, where, when one, so you don't come back with a yes/no answer, is quite difficult, and steering people down a route to get to a yes/no answer is a bit of skill, and also probably it's quite a lot of practice as well.
Yes.
People don't practice communicating. And one of the things I speak to people, when I say, do you do business development? No, I don't know how to do it. I've never been trained. You said, well, when you go out and speak to your friends, what do you talk about? I'll go and talk about the football or the weather or whatever else. It's exactly the same. You're just having a conversation and see where that conversation, you're developing a relationship, you'll start sharing information. how you're doing at work, what's keeping you awake at night, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it's something that people don't really learn or practice, I think.
No, and I think it does take a bit of practice, and I think certainly in that business development environment, I mean, that was quite new to me after 15 years in the public sector before I sort of joined an agency. There is that pressure to feel as though you're performing, whereas ultimately it is about human relationships and human connection and finding those points of commonality. We've recently been doing some quite granular local engagement on devolution in, I won't say which part of the country, but it's a part of the country that's a northern bit of the country that's currently sort of exploring devolution or the next phase of devolution. And the sort of leaders in that area have asked us to help them sort of just find out what people think basically, and what are the issues that devolution could really help them with. And we spoke to, I think it was over 450 people over 2 consecutive weekends. Just sort of, we didn't give them the big sell. We were just like, this is what's happening. There's going to be changes to the way decisions are made. What do you think? And, what are the issues that affect you day to day? And it was quite interesting, I think, going back to that previous point I made about, politicians not listening to what people are really saying. What we hear a lot in the media is immigration being a real defining issue for a lot of people. And, I'm not saying there aren't challenges around immigration, but in 450 conversations, only 2 people mentioned that. What people were really talking about was that their communities aren't working for them. They can't get a GP appointment. They can't get a bus into town. Their children can't get a bus to the good, FE college to kind of study the course that they want to do, to go on to the university they want to. And it's just, so the message I took from that is like, people just want things to work. And that's what people are looking for.
Fairly basic stuff as well.
It's the basic stuff, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's a thing I've, particularly around some of the innovation things, around asking 5 whys. Have you heard about 5 whys?
Yeah, I like that.
Keep asking why, and eventually you get to the crux of the problem.
Yeah.
Because obviously when you originally asked that question, like, do you want devolution? No.
Yeah.
Why? And then why? And then why? And then you get to the point of, actually, I just want be able to get a bus at the end of my street.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I want.
Yeah, and it was just amazing chatting to people and feeling like this should be so fixable.
Yeah.
What people want, they don't want the earth. They just want to, their community should work for them and to be able to, live their lives.
So perfect segue. Thanks, Racheal. To my last question. So obviously innovation has shaped the way built environment and how we interact with it. One of the reasons we created Curious Conversations is to get interesting people in from different backgrounds, like yourself. So based on what you see, what you feel, what you've experienced, what do you think our built environment in the future looks like, or how do you think we'll interact with it?
I mean, given how much the world has changed in just 2025 so far, I think it's really hard to do the crystal ball gazing at the moment, so I won't even attempt to do that. But I think some of the themes that are going to define the built environment over the next generation or so is firstly people. I think we're in a sort of post-pandemic digitization of the economy. I think we need to start questioning, well, what are the purpose of our places? And how do they suit the changing needs of people? So I think thinking how people want to interact with their places, talking to them and engaging with them to find out what their priorities are, and listening, absolutely, really listening to what they're really saying is key to that. And then partnerships would be the other one. I think, I sort of joined the public sector in the sort of dying days of when the public sector was, had resources and had money to kind of really invest in regeneration and, kind of big shiny projects. I think those days are gone, certainly for a few generations. So I think that partnership working between public and private sectors, but also with communities, is going to be absolutely key to making sure that we define what the purpose of our places are, and we make sure they're meeting the needs of people, not just the, obviously the economy is important, but not just the economy. And that's, I think, what's going to be, 2 of the defining themes.
I am going to pick up on something you said earlier. you haven't said about a working transport network across the north.
Yeah, well, absolutely. No, yeah, definitely a working transport network across the north. We can only hope.
We'll have flying cars, don't worry, in the future. Flying northern cars everywhere, flying around everywhere. Don't need trains, it'll be fine. So that's great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So is there anything you'd like to tell our listeners about any exciting projects you're working on at the moment?
Yes, well, I mentioned obviously the devolution project we've been working on in terms of public engagement. That's been a really, really interesting one. But devolution as a theme is, a big priority that we as an agency and me personally are very involved in. So before joining Social in my current role, I spent about 10 years at the coalface of devolution. So I'm a survivor of Yorkshire devolution, if anybody listening to this is familiar with that process. So, had a really incredible insight into that process. And now I'm supporting quite a lot of clients, both in the public sector areas that are looking to, explore devolution, take those next steps, helping them sort of, do that in the right way, but also the private sector. We're working with a lot of developers, house builders, and others that want to engage with combined authorities. I think going back to that partnership point that I just made, I think, a lot of developers and house builders and that, those in the placemaking industry are alive to the need for partnership working, but also the opportunity. Yep. So keen to kind of work with mayors and with combined authorities to see how, and local authorities to see how they can kind of support their priorities. So we're doing a lot of that as well, helping organisations make sense of that devolved landscape.
Yeah, brilliant. So as a thank you, we'd normally like to make a donation to a charity you support. So you'd like to tell us a little bit about that charity and why you chose them, please?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's amazing that RLB does that. So big thank you. The charity I've chosen is one from my hometown of Middlesbrough. It's called Ruby's Charity. And it is a charity that supports young girls in the town sort of to develop their confidence, their self-esteem, and sort of tackle any mental health or other issues that might be holding them back. And the charity was formed, I think it was in 2017. Its patron is Steph McGovern, also from Middlesbrough, when a report came out from Plan International, the children's charity, that said that girls in Middlesbrough basically had the worst start in life than anywhere else in the country. And as someone who's from Middlesbrough, first of all, that was just devastating to hear. But also as somebody from the town who's had my own challenges with confidence, has felt that my accent has kind of held me back in some ways, or certainly being conscious of my accent in sort of forging my professional career. That was just a charity that's doing something brilliant to support girls from, kind of working class backgrounds in the town that I grew up in. So, yeah.
Lovely.
That's one I've chosen.
Perfect. Thank you. So thank you, Racheal. It's been really exciting. Incredible insights and I suppose delving a little bit into your passion for devolution and your nice T-shirt with being a proud Northerner. Very good. And also some of the stuff, I think that the charity, I suppose, plays back to one of the things I mentioned at the very beginning around your passion for young people and then get them into making their lives better effectively by giving them opportunities they typically wouldn't get.
Yeah, I think certainly in the industry I work in, it is an industry that is kind of renowned for the unpaid internship, the mates kind of contacts and things like that. So I think there's a lot of organisations now that are really working to combat that. So as well as obviously Ruby's, the charity I've chosen, big shout out to Channel 4, who with their national HQ in Leeds are doing a huge amount to try and create new ways into the profession, to creative industries from people from backgrounds that are underrepresented. And me as us as a business and me personally are kind of really committed to supporting that.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thanks for today. Thanks for spending the time to give some really great insights. And to our listeners, hope you enjoyed today. Stay creative, stay curious, and hope to see you on the next episode of Curious Conversations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Curious Conversations.